Dr. Natalie Marr, and this is Jennifer Zenz Olson, and we are Women of Wellness. You are going to be watching a video in our series on teen suicide, A Call to Connection, and you'll be meeting with Andrea, Laura, and KJ. And these three women are adults that struggled with suicide as teenagers. And so it's a really lovely series to hear their point of view. You're also going to be introduced to Keith Howard, a colleague of Jennifer's, and also a school counselor at the Elk River High School that is familiar with all three of these women. So we're just going to let you watch their personal stories.
My personal experience with teen suicide is I tried, or didn't try, well, maybe a little, I guess, but definitely contemplated it, and I got the help that I needed before I did the next step with Mr. Howard, and got the help that I needed, and now I'm here with my wonderful family. So without him, I wouldn't be here. Oh, I remember mental health issues probably starting back to middle school. So, gosh, I'm so old now. I don't remember how old you are in middle school, but
For real.
I started back then. I had a lot of, I went to some therapy back then. But I really got deep down into the issues where, you're contemplating suicide, and cutting of the wrists, probably around like 16, 17.
Okay.
Had a boyfriend who was not the best boyfriend, and yeah.
Okay.
So I think it's a mental health issue started back as far as middle school for sure.
My personal experience was my sister. She committed suicide after the first day of her junior year. So I was 14, and I had found her. So it was very, very traumatic. And, kind of like Keith's brother, she definitely didn't, if there is, a description of people that commit suicide, she wouldn't have fit it.
I've dealt with like the suicide aspect within myself as a teen. I was in and out of treatment my high school years. My mom attempted suicide when I was in 6th grade. Yeah, 6th grade. I'm like, I don't even know anymore. And that's kind of when like my self-harm and stuff started, because like I didn't know how to deal with like almost losing my mom, but the mental health started when I was like, had to have been 6 or 7 after my brother passed away. So I remember being young and writing suicide notes, not really knowing what it meant, but yet still I didn't want to be here. Like, it's not fair. Like, I wanted it to be me and not my brother.
Yeah.
Weird at that age, how, whatever. I've dealt with multiple attempts myself. Been in and out of treatments, inpatient, outpatient, residential. Been in therapy since I was probably 6, 7, once my brother passed away. So and I've lost 4 people in a 3-year time period. I've saved a couple of my friends. It's been a whirlwind.
So as you can see from Laura and Andrea and KJ, as they share their stories about their struggles with suicide and how each of them had their own experience, what does become clear is how big of a role that Keith Howard actually played in their experience. And so I want to just briefly introduce him and how I got to know him. So as a clinician in the community, I worked pretty closely with Keith. He was he was my very favorite counselor of all time, if I'm being really honest, for the reasons that you just heard people speak to. He was so humble and so willing to be vulnerable, and went into classrooms and talked about his personal story of losing his brother to suicide. And I knew that even some of the kids on my caseload that didn't have him as a counselor would seek him out. So what I really watched was that vulnerability and that connectability become this just incredible resource for kids, because they knew they could go to him and trust him, and that he would be with them in those experiences and feelings, and he wouldn't shy away from it. And so I just had this incredible experience of working with him as a colleague in the community. I just trusted him. And so when we started doing this process, I reached out to him. I was like, I have this great counselor that I worked with for years. I would love to include him. And even though he is now retired, he has decided to step in this project and help us out, and he has just been absolutely stunning. And so it was actually his resource and suggestion that we utilize this population of people, which really changed up, I think, the face of this entire project, which was kind of great, right? It was so organic, but we were just going to do a teen video, kids that are actively in the middle of this kind of process in some way, shape, or form, or living through an experience as a teen. But really what we ended up finding was talking with these young adults who've already gone through it and experienced it was, I think, probably just one of the most telling aspects of doing this entire series.
Right. It really gave more collective wisdom to how to get through this and what does it look like on the other side, which was a unique perspective we hadn't originally thought about going with, but were able to capture with these three women.
So really powerful. So that is who Keith Howard is, and you guys will end up seeing him throughout the video series as well. He's been a huge component of this. We just wanted you to know who he was and how he got involved with us. We're super blessed to have him in this journey with us. So here we go.
If I wouldn't have had him as a supportive person in the school, I mean, that's would have been my end. You know what I mean? And so because I trusted him so much and I was at my lowest low, I reached out to him. I was working with a different person and I think our personalities just didn't click very well.
Yep.
And so she referred me to Mr. Howard. Maybe that's how it is then. Yeah, that's what it is. She referred me to you, and then that's how we got introduced and went through all of this together then. He related to me so well. I struggled with depression. I had ADD. I had a lot of just mental health. I needed help and I needed someone to care. And he really showed that he cared. And I felt very comfortable telling him all sorts of things. He just got down to my level and I mean, he became a true friend. He wasn't just like a faculty teacher he became a friend. He took the time. It didn't matter if I went in there with like the biggest problem in the world or like a small problem. I mean, he let me talk it out with him there wasn't a time limit,
Yeah.
He never put a time limit on it. And he made me feel that I could say what I wanted to say, and he would give me constructive advice. And it didn't ever feel like he was criticizing or judging a 16-year-old over it,
My parents had me in a lot of grief support groups. I saw a lot of counselors. I had EMDR therapy, which was amazing, I will say. A lot of my support that I got was outside of the school. Okay. And it was with my parents. And my stepdad is a physician, so I think he had resources at his fingertips, working at the hospital, he had people there. So I was very fortunate in that aspect. I guess my resource in the school was being involved in the suicide prevention. Even though I did struggle with my own stuff, I was still out there advocating for it. And that was therapeutic, beneficial for me. Sure. Obviously, with Mr. Howard being there and sharing his own personal experience with his brother, and I know that they were very close, and my sister and I were very close. So that, connection with him, having him keep me involved in speaking to the health classes about mental health meant a lot. And even now that he's retired, which was really sad when he retired, even though he's not cool anymore, he passed that ball on to other teachers that have done a really good job keeping me involved. They keep asking me to come back every year, even though it doesn't always work for me. And I had a good school counselor. So I just think it's so different individually for everybody, whether you have support at home, if you have friends, or if you get the support from school. We just got to figure out how to get it, make it accessible to people.
They put me in outpatient for 6.5 weeks my sophomore year. And then because my mom was tired of dealing with the threats and everything they dropped me off at the hospital. I ended up in inpatient for a month and a half, then ended up in residential in Wisconsin for 8.5 months. Came home. Mom kicked me out after I was 18, and I've dealt with it since. So I really haven't, until I met my therapist that I see now, I really didn't have the support. I love my grandparents. They just don't know how to, they're in that generation. They don't know how to help. They really don't.
Yeah.
And so it's hard. I've lived with them since I was 18. So I really just haven't had that sense of connection where I felt like I could reach out and get the help I needed, because it always came back of your attention seeking.
So now you know a little bit more about these three women and what really worked for them. What you're going to see next in this video series is we asked them what they knew about suicide beforehand and what, if anything, was helpful to them or not helpful to them. So we'll watch that here.
When my sister committed suicide, I didn't even know what it was. Do you feel like we've come a ways from the stigma and the fear of talking about it makes it happen? So that's my personal experience. I guess I don't know what the kids are learning now. I know that my children have learned a little bit about mental health, my older two, but I definitely feel like there could be more. And I don't think there can ever be enough, really. I don't know that I learned a lot in school other than being involved in like the Yellow Ribbon project. But my parents, you know, I spent 2 times in the mental health unit at the hospital back when they had one there. I mean, I learned a lot there, but I don't know that the resources were really in the school system. Go into health classes and see about, you know, posters is what I remember. The posters about drug use and the posters about in pregnancy or abuse, but you don't really see a lot about advocating for mental health or getting away from that like stigma.
Remember it always being like, don't make a permanent solution out of a temporary problem. You know, I think that was the biggest thing when I was growing up. But then I think after that, that's kind of where it stopped. Like they didn't dig deeper into mental health issues or anything like that. It was kind of like, hey, if you need help, talk to somebody. And then that was it. You know, there wasn't any kind of like follow through or follow up or education or that kind of thing.
I feel like I didn't learn much about it in school. I know it was like talked about and like all that stuff, but I feel like I learned more about it when I was in treatment.
Yep.
And when I did like the therapy and you know, stuff like that. I don't feel like in school I really learned much about it besides what like Andrea was saying and stuff like that. So it just definitely was never like it was like, oh, reach out to somebody, and then it was like there was nothing after that. There was no like crisis lines that I knew of or like anything like that, which I feel like would be super helpful if like nowadays like teens had these crisis lines before you got to this point, because I have a feeling having those would have helped a little bit more during like that time.
Sure.
Because I feel like also like even especially in middle school, the counselor was great there but didn't really know how to like address it or handle it or whatever, so it just kind of felt like there was this like almost like I was being judged, and I know I'm not, but yet it made it so I didn't talk about it anymore, and like at home I could never talk about it, so it didn't really like I had nowhere, I feel like there was nowhere that I could go to for it.
As we listen to Andrea and Lori and KJ talk about education and how their experience, there's a theme here that you'll start to notice as the teens have already represented that they do not feel like there's enough education in the school system. And this panel also just reemphasizes this theme that there isn't enough education. And I, in fact, love one of my favorite statements that she makes is there was posters in high school about teen pregnancy and drug use and anti-drug use. So there's all these things, but interestingly, there was nothing about mental health.
Right.
And so I think even if we have transitioned into more of that in today's day and age, I still don't know. It's clearly the message is that it's not enough. It's just not being covered the way that we would like it to. And so next up, we have asked our panel to speak to the barriers that they faced in this process.
It was embarrassing for me because my sister having committed suicide, to admit that I ever had those feelings or those struggles, or, you know, using drugs to deal with my depression and stuff. It's kind of embarrassing to talk about it at school, like to admit my own issues. I was personally fighting so many demons that I honestly couldn't tell you if the resources were there or not, because I wasn't really there.
I really liked what she just said about knowing if the resources were in the school because you weren't there. And I think when you're in that kind of a state of mind, it's hard to even know if there really is good resources at the schools. I mean, so
Right.
I
So
think that was a very good statement. Yeah,
Well,
without
yeah.
connections
Right.
like what we
Sure.
had with Mr. Howard, without
Sure.
that strong connection, I mean, you probably
Right.
don't even know what's there. You know, for me and my family, my parents both struggle with depression. You know, they were off and on of depression medicines. I mean, all that I can remember. And, you know, I truly want to say that they were as supportive as they were, you know, or as they could be when I was, you know, they got me to therapy. They supported my relationship with Mr. Howard. My dad and I and Mr. Howard have gone golfing all together. They were very wonderful parents. However, I think a lot of also my mental health issues did come from them, you know, just with higher expectations, you know, a lot of little things. And I'm still dealing with those types of things now as an adult, you know. So I think because of their mental issues, that disconnect happened, you know, where I didn't feel comfortable going to them. Since Mr. Howard brought me into this, you know, I've kind of been thinking about it and trying to like rack my brain as to like, why was this, you know, really what was the disconnect between me and my parents for that? And, you know, it's just so muddy of waters, I guess, on how we got to where we are. I mean, they're wonderful parents. I had a wonderful childhood. Um, it's something happened though where I just didn't feel I could trust them that way, you know?
I really didn't seek out much because my parents have always said I was attention seeking. So I didn't have any support at home. So if I were to reach out and they found out, I got in a lot of trouble for it, which made everything so much worse. So eventually I say they got sick of me, but that's just my wording. I don't know like the correct wording for it. I think the biggest thing with me, it was just weird because like my mom attempted, like we almost lost her. So like the idea that like they all thought I was attention seeking, even though like my mom attempted, it just baffles me. It just that connection isn't there.
Yeah.
Because my mom still even says I'm attention seeking, and I look at her like, okay, so is that what you were doing? Even though I know that that's not what it is, but it's like, so why are you claiming I am, but yet you did it?
You saying anything to the fact of any type of mental health issues, it's not attention seeking, it's a cry for help. It's my biggest pet peeve when parents look at their kid and say, well, go figure it out. I mean, but they don't have the tools to go. I mean, I know this is on like a way scaled down perspective from like high schools, but like it's the beginning for that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You know, when they say go figure it out, I'm like, well, how is your 4-year-old going to go figure out that their feelings should be validated because that child just took their toy? I mean,
No,
they need the guidance.
It sets a tone. If our answer is go figure it out, it means I can't be with you. You go do it. Right.
Yeah.
So even though people don't mean to on a big scale, it's a tone and a message for your kid, right?
But that's where they learn it though.
That's exactly right.
You know, so when my 5-year-old has a son has a problem when he's 15, and if my answer has always been to go figure it out, I mean, I don't know why he's not going to come and talk to me. I feel like our world culture now has such like a pick yourself up by the bootstraps type of a feeling.
Yes.
But I think that is so, you know, we go back to the word, but it's so disconnecting because, you know, you say that, but then you want to preach that we're a community and we have this, you know, we're doing this all together, but you've got to walk the walk along with the talk.
And I really didn't like accept any of the help until, I don't even know, like, because I felt like my parents gave up on me, so I didn't really like care about getting the help, didn't really care about getting better. So up until the last like couple of years, I've actually like accepted help. But yeah, as it was just, I think it was that disconnection, and then my home life, it just really I didn't really have anybody.
Was there anybody in the school that you made a connection with at all?
No, because I really wasn't like there. I came back 2 weeks before my sophomore year ended. I don't even know why I went back to school. I don't know.
Mhm.
That beats me. But, and then I turned, let's see, right after my birthday's in November, I ended up an inpatient. So I didn't really seek out anybody and connect with anybody because it was just like I was in, out. And then I came back my senior year and I did the focus program at Vandenberg and then integrated back into the high school at the end of my senior year. So it was like I really didn't have, even going through all that, and the treatments and everything, I still didn't have anybody I felt like I could connect to. Like I just felt like completely invisible with it. Like, my grandparents are very big, like, if you pray about it, like, you'll be better. Like, and I'm not saying like religion is bad or like whatever, but I hate hearing, basically I feel invalidated when my grandparents out here, my grandma in Colorado sits there and is like, you have to pray about it and you'll be fine. Like, you don't need therapy, you don't need this. And I look at them like, no, I need therapy. I would not be in therapy if I did not need it. No. My mind needs therapy. Like, but yet I still, because my family and everybody has implanted that into my life, I just never want anybody to feel that because it's already a horrible feeling when you're already suicidal and you're already at that point and you don't know where to turn. For somebody to like totally invalidate your feelings, it carries on with you.
Absolutely.
And maybe not for everybody if you work through it, whatever, everybody's different, but for me it's carried on where I sit in my room half the time, I'm like, I have friends, I could reach out. Who do I reach out to? Because now I've taught myself out of reaching out because I feel like a burden. Because I see it with my sister, she doesn't even reach out, and it's like I have to pry things out of her, and I hate prying things out of people, but I don't want her to feel alone either. She's 15, she's my whole world. And then it's hard because if you're feeling unsafe, then they call your parents. And then there's this like where I would go home and I'd get yelled at for that. So I never reached out after that.
Right.
So there's got to be, and I get it, with the being underage and all that stuff, but there's got to be something work in there in that network. So that way kids still feel safe talking about it in schools. It was not even helpful that they were calling my parents because then it just made things worse, which spiraled, which I get it, safety to keep, like you were saying, but there's got to be that middle ground.
So what is really interesting is that by accident, we have a whole spectrum of family involvement between these three women. And uniquely, it kind of shows you how much access they would even have within their school resources, depending on how much support they had in their home life.
And I think it's really interesting to listen to them talk about that for some of them, particularly KJ speaks to having a lot of issues at home and really honestly kind of being afraid to access resources for fear of being punished at home, for seeking out kind of attention. And so for me, I think it's really interesting to hear them say that essentially that internal school connection to a person was how they accessed resources.
Right.
And without that, I think things would have looked very, very differently for each of them. But really, their big, I think, theme has been that was the resource that they had within the school system, and that was the most beneficial piece that they had. And so interesting to kind of just pay attention to the fact that they had very, very, again, unplanned, but different experiences in their family systems from not necessarily being able to be very involved because of struggles to wanting to be involved and trying to support and help, but then their parents having some issues themselves they struggle with, which is very normal. And then having parents that were almost like hyper vigilant because they had already lost a child to suicide. And so it's interesting to look at that span, but then how those stories then incorporate into the school system and how they access what they needed there. And at least that was there. So that's powerful.
And very powerfully, Laura and Andrea speak to when you personally are going through mental health problems, you don't access, unless you have a connection to somebody that will bring you to that care, then you're not going to access that care. And that is also a theme that you see throughout our video series is how do we better get the care to the people instead of asking people to access the care, especially teens, asking teens to access care when they aren't there is really how Andrea and Laura spoke to it. So I think that was a really powerful piece as well.
Yeah, it was. And I think one of the things we're gonna flow into next is talking about stigma. And I think that's another huge component though, that we have heard the themes of stigma are going to come back up time and time again. And so I think that's another barrier for people to access resources is that we're still living in a day and age where that stigma still influences how we determine to reach out and access resources or not. And so next up, they're going to tell us a little bit about their experiences there as well.
Okay.
It's a lot of mixture.
Okay.
I feel like for me, I have like, I don't know. There's a lot of different aspects. I know like when I would come out of like treatments and stuff, there's a bunch of like rumors and stuff that went around because my mom knew people and she told people and my grandmother tells people and the stories are never the same. So then those kids would find out and then I'd come back to school and it was all of a sudden like I died and came back to life basically. Like that's like I mean I was bullied my whole life and in general and it got worse definitely once like I got back to treatments when I came back my senior year, like when I was actually back in the high school, I wouldn't even like sit in half my classes because the kids would make fun of me. Like there was kids that would purposely sit behind me and make fun of me for my self-harm and all that, and I was like, you guys like are the reasons that this keeps happening because I like my one teacher was awesome about it and was like, yeah, you can, leave the class, and I was always getting my work done, but it was like yeah, it was bad. And then
that around that stigma.
Right.
When my sister died, we weren't, my parents, like, they donated jerseys to the girls' hockey team. She played hockey. And my mom does embroidery, and she had requested to have a small number 9 embroidered on the bottom of all of these jerseys in memory of my sister. And they voted against it because of how she died. Now, had she died in a car accident or something, they would have probably allowed, to memorialize it, but they didn't want to, they looked at it as glorifying suicide. I've gone back and forth on that one. I understand it, but it was also very difficult because there was a lot of shame that came along with my sister's.
Yeah.
And then even my own attempts and my own issues. Well, I mean, I have lots of personal, very like specific examples. For instance, it was, the hockey team, the donation of the jerseys in memory of my sister, but not allowing to memorialize the jerseys. I know there was a lot of bullying for me. The day of my sister's wake, or the night of my sister's wake, was my first performance for the dance team at the football game that night. And because I hadn't eaten for, she died Wednesday, her funeral was already Friday, or wake was already Friday night. I hadn't eaten, and anyhow, I ended up passing out after we danced, and they put me in the back of the ambulance and whatever, just gave me some Gatorade. I was fine. I just was exhausted, and there were bullies. Like kids were saying things like, "Oh, I hope she doesn't die like her sister just did." And then, when I was hospitalized for the depression, there wasn't a suicide attempt the first time that I was hospitalized, but there were some awful things that other students said, and the whole like, KJ, I can understand that whole seeking thing because I was told that same thing, like, oh, you're gonna go kill yourself like your sister did. You just want attention. And but the truth was I was really struggling. There was also, I was going to do, in memory of my sister, we had a slideshow at the high school for a talent show, and I was going to sing a song and do the slideshow, and they wouldn't allow it. Which, I mean, in perspective now, I'm like, it probably would have just been so sad, like very, very sad. But my idea was to put messages in there of hope, and that wasn't allowed. So it really does, for me, boil down to the stigma, embarrassment, the shame, the bullying, other kids being mean about it. Well, isn't that kind of bring me to the point where, like, is therapy bad? It was embarrassing, painful, and I grew up in a very Christian family, and I mean, I was even told by my grandparents that my sister was not going to go to heaven. I don't know how. So you get it from all aspects. You get it from religious aspects. At one point, the church grew up and almost didn't want us to have her funeral there because of how she had died.
So that was a short section, but one of the reasons we really felt we wanted to pull out this idea about stigma is that it is such a critical barrier in access to care. So the next section that we're going to talk about is their recommendations, their collective wisdom on what we could do, what we can do better, maybe to help future generations. However, one of these critical barriers, that stigma, is such an important piece. Peers, not having a common language or a common understanding of mental health is one of the reasons why other peers won't access care. Right. So as we talk about these recommendations, education, we're not just talking about we want more education for the teens that need the care. We're talking about we want more education and more of a language around mental health itself, so it reduces that barrier of peer-to-peer stigma or stigma within our community.
Right, and I think that's the theme of this. Stigma is throughout every single panel, every single person we talk to, and really it comes through loud and clear that this is still a functioning piece of our culture, that we have not, even making small steps, we still have so far to go. And that's really preventing people from getting out there and getting resources. But like Natalie said, if we don't educate everyone, if it doesn't become just a facet of our every single day culture and validation and support, then we're going to continue to face these kinds of, I think, systemic problems. And so we really hope for reducing that stigma and creating education around this from the minute that people are entering the school system, and even within our community.
Even within their families.
Absolutely.
Like, that everybody have, the communities have, the families have, the schools have a common language about what mental health is, so it doesn't preclude people from wanting to access care.
Exactly.
So let's just visit their opinions on some recommendations on what we could be doing better.
Well, it really frustrated me that Laura had that experience with, the churches and that kind of thing with her. I mean, that's just, it's not shameful, I mean, and we have to hug these families, like Laura's family, and hug them and protect them and let them grieve and not feel the shamefulness for someone else's decision, and I think, because I have really young children, I think starting it small, it starts with building that validation when children are young, that it's okay to be frustrated that mom said no, that you don't get a sucker. That doesn't change the fact that you're still not getting a sucker, but it's okay to be frustrated with me about that, And I think just building that language from such an early age,
Absolutely.
would help as kids get older. Let them feel what they feel. Don't try to change their feeling. And just if you can't connect with them on the level where they feel that they can talk to you, find somebody or encourage them, if they already have somebody, but keep that encouragement to have that relationship, or find the person or help them find the person that'll help them that they need.
Even
I
like
feel like
going
in
through
today's
some
day and age, therapy should just be like the norm. I mean, kids are subjected to so much more than I ever was, and it's just, I mean, I feel like they need so much more and need so many more connections with other people so that they don't feel that way, because like Laura said, and I think KJ just said about bullying, I mean, I feel like it just should be the norm. I mean, it takes away some of that stigma of that culture, that negativity out there about it, that where if you go to therapy, you're a psychopath, where if you have mental health issues, you're crazy, I mean, it's just, I don't know, I guess fixing that would be the bigger thing. And I think it starts within the school. Like, the school needs to feel like a community. The kids need to feel like they need to take care of each other, that, sure, they all go to Elk River, or they all go to Blaine, or they all live in these towns, but this is your school. This is your friend, you know, this is your neighbor. We all have to take care of each other. I
Yeah.
gotta speak to the language thing that you just said. I do a lot of like the early childhood family education classes here at Elk River. And I did them with my son. He'll be 6 in October, and I've done them with my daughter and with my youngest, and they're teaching things, and I mean they're just laying groundwork for like children to learn language, which, you know, whatever, but um you know, to like label emotions and to label certain things, and I see that as groundwork and footwork for this type of mental
Absolutely.
health thing for
Oh,
when
yeah.
they're older. I feel like it's just good tools that they're gonna have later, and I feel like it's so well that it started now in ECFE. So there might be some hope for the future that these programs are out there now in these communities and they're teaching those kinds of things. So this also has to be just as important as those things, because it's not shameful and it's not, you know, you have to look at it differently, and that you get to change the whole thing. I think to build off of what you just said about teachers, Laura, about getting them the training as well, you know, and it goes back to staffing. You know, you guys talked about 30 counselors for one school. I mean, that's not feasible, of course, but you know, I think teachers, I mean, beyond counselors, I think teachers just have way too much on their plates.
Agreed.
To handle their workload, to handle tutoring, and then also when there isn't enough funds for counselors, but to have the, you know, the teachers making those connections that like Mr. Howard did with the three of us. I think that would be so helpful, because, you know, it takes an army to get rid of a problem like this, and it's so needed.
Absolutely.
You know, we need to build that, and we need to train them, and, you know, because it just shouldn't be happening.
I mean, I think families as a whole need to be educated about it. I don't know how the school system could go about doing that, implementing, you know, maybe they have kids go home and do stuff like projects with their parents. How do you educate families to be more supportive? I don't know.
When you guys brought up, like, you know, making it like a parent and school and child thing, you know, when Laura brought that up, I mean, I think that if that would have helped in my parents as well, you know, I mean, it would have made us all closer to do it together.
I know one thing for me with like my mental health that has really helped is learning about myself and my personality. And just like when you go to marriage counseling, you know, or premarital counseling, and you take these personality tests and you read them back to yourself and you see how different you and your soon to be partner are. But to read about yourself, I don't know, maybe it's a self-indulgence thing, I don't know, but to read about yourself, it's like, oh yeah, that is me. And wow, I can talk a lot, but I am an introvert. Like, I never knew that, you know. And I'm 30, almost 5 years old, and the more I learn about myself, the easier it is for me to care for myself and to, you know, like Dr. Natalie was saying, she knows a healthy person. I shouldn't have these thoughts, you know. I know it'll pass, and it's like, I know when I start feeling that way, I know it'll pass, that it's but it's the education about myself and how to deal with it. And I feel like kids would maybe find it fascinating to take some of these tests that are only available to us by going and asking for them from, you know, a psychologist, a psychiatrist. It's like, to have those, we do them for careers. Why don't we do them for about ourselves? I don't know if I have the answer to what more is, but somebody does. You and, you know, Jen and Dr. Natalie, I mean, maybe you guys have the answer, but regardless of who comes up with it, more needs to be done, and it needs to be talked about more, and there just needs to overall be more awareness. There was a point where Elk River was going through, you know, similar to what Blaine just recently went through, probably over a longer span of time. But I don't know, Keith, if you know any statistics, but I had heard that at one point Elk River had the highest suicide rating, and I think it was like 99 to 2004. And whether it was all of Minnesota or I'm not really quite sure, but Elk River has shown a lot. I mean, it takes a whole village.
Right.
And it takes a lot of courage too, because but it is amazing to see. And so if every community could have something like that, where you get past that shame and that stigma, I think it would just be incredible.
Because I just don't want anybody to go into their adult life at, you know, you turn 18 and still feel like you have nobody. Because then I felt like the only way I was getting help was in hospitals and stuff. And I hate being in the hospital. Mind you, I've spent the majority of being 19 and 20 in the hospital. Like, I was in and out. And because I felt like that was the only sense of where somebody was going to listen to me. And I don't want people to get to that point.
Right.
And I get it, go to the hospital if you need to. I'm not saying that. But I don't want, I've seen it so many times. Or, I mean, when I was 18, I was still on the adolescent unit because I was still in, like, high school. And I see these kids developing these patterns of in and out because that's the only place they feel validated. And I don't want that.
Right.
Because it's a short term, you know, and then you get wrapped into all the other treatments, and it's just like if you have that validation outside of there, it's so much easier. Even though I do have the people that validate me, I still have the people I can go to. I still feel bad because that's what was ingrained in my head, and so it's always like when I get down that part, it's like I want to end up in the hospital because I know I'm going to be validated, and I don't want to keep ending up there just for like that reason because I know I'm strong enough without it. Listen and validate. Because school is sometimes somebody's only escape, and if they're not feeling validated there, or if they don't have anybody that will listen to them there, you're gonna create more problems. You know, learning the signs. Every teacher should be trained in it in some way, shape, or form. Learning the signs. You know, knowing the code words of whatever, you know, coming up with code words with students on if they're like dealing with it, having your own code word system on I don't feel safe, but I'm not going to say that because I know that helped me a lot. Where I'll sit there and I'll say certain things and my friends will be like, okay, you're not doing well, what's going on? Because sometimes that reaching out is hard, you know, so just the validation, just all of that I feel like needs to be in the schools and like learning the signs, the symptoms, and sometimes they're not there. You know, sometimes you don't they're not there, but for the kids that have them and that it is present, like something needs to be done. Like either way, something needs to be done, and they need to be more educated, and there needs to just because it frustrates me because as somebody who went through it and didn't really feel like I had that, I think the biggest piece would be that validation. So like there's gotta be that I feel like connection, that middle ground somewhere in there too, because if you can come up with a child and sit there and be like, okay, what are your coping skills for one? Do you have anybody you can talk to for two? Or just like in general, like brainstorming ideas, it might help them when they go home in any way, shape, or form. Just be like, okay, well, we're gonna try this tonight. Do not give up on your child, because that's where part of my problem stem from now is because my parents gave up on me and they still don't really they're not really involved in my life. And so the biggest thing is just don't give up on your child. Just because you don't understand it, figure out ways to understand it. If they get put on a new med, research it, figure it out, you know, talk to their counselor, talk to whoever, figure out ways to help them, because once you give up on your child, they give up on themselves even more. If my parents would have sat there and taken the time and like read up on the meds I'm on, the side effects, the, you know, how it's gonna could help, doesn't help, you know, my diagnoses, because they were throwing diagnoses out like there was no tomorrow. Like I've just been this whole like it's like a lab rat sometimes, but like just I wish my parents would have gone through that more. And I feel like you just need to educate yourself. And I feel like that's what the community too, I guess, is educating yourself, like reading up. Like I still read up on diagnoses and medications, and I have my set diagnosis right now and I'm not on any meds right now. And I still am consistently learning because I have friends, you know, that deal with mental health still, like, you know, just in case my sister were to be on something, because I just feel like for me, if I'm educated, I can help other people be educated, even though I'm not like in that, you know, sense of a professional sense, but as somebody who's been through it. Yeah, because it's like you look on the internet and you find all this stuff and you don't know really what's to like, what's real, what isn't, like, is that even a valuable source? Like, it needs to be condensed a little bit more, because that's I think one of the biggest issues is people are not educated. People are not educating themselves in the right way either, because the internet has a gazillion freaking things. Having crisis lines out there more, and having, you know, crisis centers, I feel like are the biggest thing, is having the crisis centers, because I've gone to a few of those instead of going to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, just being educated and where those are in your community and, you know, just that type of stuff. Having, like, those little bits of things to kind of help teachers and stuff, like, implant, like, the skills and stuff, I feel like it's huge. Like, I've always said DBT should be taught in school in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, you can't sit there and have a whole health class on DBT, but, like, even in the mental health units, throwing that stuff in there just subtly, just, like...
Yeah.
I feel like would help, because then I feel like teachers also would know where to look when it comes to that, like, helping students with skills and stuff.
I'd like to add something in there too,
Yeah.
if I could. You know, one of the first kids I ever worked with when I became a counselor after teaching English for a long time. Anyway, this kid came into my office in March of my first year at the middle school. Now he was ninth grader, junior high, and he said, "You know what? I've been thinking about it. I think I'm going to commit suicide." I mean, just out of the blue, you know. I'd never dealt with it before, you know. But I said, "Well, I have to call your mom and talk to her about it." And I called her, and she says, "Oh my God, is he talking about that again? He's not serious about it." You know, and that was in March, and he committed suicide in July.
Oh, Lord.
You know, I mean, so you just have. I guess my message is you have to listen to your kids.
Yeah.
When they're telling you big stuff and little stuff. That was obviously a big thing she didn't listen to, but you know, that's my message to parents.
So wow, that was just a lot of really
Great material.
good recommendations.
Absolutely.
And we let them go for a while. We wanted them to just share with us all of this wisdom that they have, having been through this as teenagers and now being adults, having all of this good wisdom for us to really think about. And what I loved the most about it, and I'm sure you did as well, Jen, is it bumped right up against what we already were going to put into our final video, which is a toolbox for our communities, schools, families, you know, just for people to know how to better take care of themselves.
Exactly.
One of the things that I loved that came up in this was education and more parental involvement.
Absolutely.
So like early childhood, we should be teaching our kids language for talking about their emotional wellness. You know, we take kids every year to get their immunizations. We go to our physicals. So our physical health is taken care of. There's not a lot of talk community-wide, culture-wide about our emotional wellness. And yet it's such a big facet of who we are. Emotions, feelings, they're just parts of us that tell us something is amiss, that things aren't as stable as we want them to be. And we need more resource. We need to reach out and get what we need. Just like, you know, an illness or an injury is, our physical body isn't doing as well as it should. We need to get some help, right?
Our emotional health. And I think that's so huge. And I've actually even been told, as I'm recalling, as I'm thinking about these conversations, is that actually people will go into the doctor's office today and sometimes be asked now. So there are some of those short and sweet assessments that they're doing. What's interesting sometimes is that they don't get followed up on. So there's still a lag there a little bit. I'm going to say I like that we're doing that. We're making a little bit of headway there, but we have to follow through with that. So if we're doing those little mini assessments, I think it's so crucial that our healthcare providers or staff, whoever's working with those people, are inquiring about what that means for them, because that's a huge piece of this as well, is the follow through. But I love that idea of education, and following up with that, I know that Laura had spoken to the idea of doing assessments, which is just brilliant to me. That I feel like we could be doing some short and sweet assessments within the school system on a regular basis. It would take not even 5 minutes, and follow through there is about self-awareness, and it's about giving teens or children even tools to, like, oh, I'm having a hard time right now, I wonder what's going on, and inquiring about that, and then knowing kind of where to go if they are struggling, but encouraging that self-awareness. If we never pause and take a look at the feelings, we don't learn anything about ourselves. You know?
And it goes back to one of those major barriers, which is shame.
Absolutely.
Having shame about having feelings, having shame about having emotions, being embarrassed, and then not reaching out because you have this shame. So the education, the assessment, the building of self-awareness, we were just so excited that came organically out of what these ladies were talking about, because it's part of what we would like to add in our toolbox.
And then all the involvement. I think what they're talking about is the layers of involvement, from parents to the community to the school. It's
Yeah.
all of those legs that we've talked about, kind of all the pieces are involved in creating this awareness and creating change. And I just love that idea.
Yeah.
It's so neat that it came out the way that it did from them to us, completely aligned with kind of where we would love to see this go.
Yeah.
And I love too, Andrea spoke to, when we start making things, again, we start breaking down stigma and having things be more normalized by creating this education, having this self-awareness. But she said that therapy should be the norm.
Yeah.
And I love that statement. Like, therapy should just be the thing. It shouldn't be this strange, it's for crazy people, or I hate all the stigma even attached to that, because again, then it's going to preclude people from wanting to pursue getting support and resources, when in fact, honestly, therapy is for everyone. It's for everybody, right? And so I love that she just says, I just wish that should just, that should just be the norm. That shouldn't be some unusual, radical resource or idea.
No.
It should be for everybody. And I thought that was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we lead out here, what we're going to be looking at then next, and this is pretty emotional, I will tell you, the way that we end the panel's discussions each time we met with them was to ask them for their messages to teens. And so I will warn you, this is really emotional, but it's so beautiful. And so next we're going to leave it to the ladies to give their messages that they'd like to any teens that are really struggling.
I know that for me, the biggest thing is, if I could say something to my sister, she has missed out on so much. And she changed who I am, and in some ways, a really good way. But I think if she would have known what she did to my life and how there are aspects of it that she ruined and took away from me, I don't think she would have done it. And also, when I had children of my own that she has to miss out on too, that I had to re-mourn her as a mom, and no parent should ever have to bury their child. And I know that it happens. I've watched two aunts bury children, one from a car accident, one from a four-wheeler. But the difference with my mom was it could have been prevented. And it didn't have to happen. I know every time I have ever felt like it's just too bad to carry on, I mean, I've made it this far, so I know that it's worth it. And I feel so sad for my sister because she has missed out on so much. And I'm angry at her. I'm fucking mad.
Yeah.
20 years later, and I'm still mad because there is help.
Yeah.
And I've gotten it in many different ways, shapes, and forms. And some ways were better than others, but I've gotten it. And if I can make it that far, I know she could have. So, and I'm not ashamed. So I wish that nobody would feel ashamed for having those feelings. And I've had some awful things said to me. I've been told that people that commit suicide are cowards, and but I'm still not ashamed. So I don't think anybody should for feeling that way.
I think about it in the aspect, because I have a 15-year-old sister, and I've always told her that if she feels this way to come to me, because I still struggle today with it. Like, I deal with chronic suicidal thoughts, so they don't go away. Like, so I have a hard time with it, because it's like, I've gone through it, and I still struggle, so it's, like, hard to sit there and tell somebody that, like, it's like, I know it gets better, but it's hard to, like, guide that, because I still am at this point at 22 years old. I'm still dealing with it. Like, my last attempt was in December. Like, it's just, it's hard because I think about it, like, I have so many perspectives with it, with me dealing with it, with losing people to it, with just looking at my sister's struggle. It's not necessarily the way I do, but it concerns me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard because I still feel like I like burden everybody with my problems. So like I try to tell people that like you're not a burden, like your feelings are totally valid because I can't validate my own feelings.
Yeah.
I can't. I never have been able to.
Yeah.
My therapist yells at me for that one. Not literally yells, but you know. So it's just I have a hard time with it because I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yes, I know it gets better, but as somebody who deals with the chronic, it doesn't ever feel like it's gonna get better.
Yeah.
Which is hard because it's like, I know it is. I've made it this far. I've been through a lot of shitty things, especially in the last couple of years, and I've made it this far, and I'm so grateful that my attempts haven't.
Right.
Because I get to watch her grow up, I get to watch my other siblings grow up, I get to, you know, be with my grandparents. There are some days, even in my situation, and like, I think going through what I did, I still have a hard time reaching out, and I don't want anybody to get to that point where they're, you know, in their 20s and still have a hard time reaching out.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have that as a kid, I didn't have that as a teenager, so now it's like asking for help as a foreign language.
It's so hard to say it, but you know, it is only temporary, you know, and your life has just begun at that age. And you know, you always think that, you know, the world, your life, you know, you always feel that like your life can never be better than this, or you know, but it does, and it gets better. And as you learn more about yourself, you know, you do learn those tools, and you can cope better with things, and you know, you can pass messages along to youth and try to help them so that they're not, you know, what we're doing here, I guess. If I could have a time capsule to talk to myself when I was 17, you know, I would say to just hold on, and to reach out to somebody that you trust. You know, if I did not have Mr. Howard, I would not be here, and I would not have my babies. And I thank God for them and for Mr. Howard, because I wouldn't be here. Life is just so precious.
So I will say, for me, I think this was probably one of the most emotional aspects of all of our panels, is listening to their incredible messages, and the thing that they want people to know about life is precious and that the struggle is temporary. It is temporary. It might be some time, right? I mean, we never want to sell short the fact that I think it's quick and easy to say it's temporary, but to those that are suffering, it might not feel that way.
Right.
And what I think really resonated with me so much about what they had to say was all of the beautiful things that are happening in their lives today.
Yeah.
The fact that they get to spend time with their sister, their grandparents, the fact that they have children, the fact that they are happily married and out in the community doing things, and what they missed out on. And for Laura, that grief about what her sister will never get to see in her life, right, in their family's life. And so for me, I know it was like, whoo, man, I do it, just all the tears and all the feelings, but it was an incredible message that each of them sends to teens that I just think it was just an absolutely beautiful way to kind of wrap up everything that they shared with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah. And so we're so grateful for you hanging in there with us and listening to Laura and Andrea and KJ share their stories. Hang in there with us. Come back for this next panel, which will be the parental panel, all about their perspectives on teen suicide. So join us back there.